Well, we are so excited to be here with you all today. My name is Maddie. I use she and they pronouns, and I'm our Senior Development Associate at Catholics for Choice. And I will let Lauren introduce herself.
Hi everybody, I am Lauren, she, her pronouns. I'm the Senior Organizing and Movement Building Manager at Catholics for Choice. So I get to do some great campus outreach and organizing with Maddie.
Yeah, so today we have our Pro-Choice Catholicism 101 workshop. Also, at any point, if you have questions, feel free to raise your hand. We also have some questions for you that we would love your participation with. So it is workshop-based, and we would love for it to be discussion-heavy as well. But yeah, we'll get a little bit into Catholic theology, reproductive rights, guiding principles of pro-choice Catholicism, and then we'll talk about how you can get more involved.
Great, so before we get started, I just wanted to announce and share some ground rules that hopefully everybody can be on board with. Those are all on the screen, so I won't read them verbatim, but largely we just ask that you show up to this space, especially, as Maddie said, that there will be some time for conversation and reflection. So as others are sharing, we ask that you respect other ideas that you hear, choose curiosity, and just practice the respect that you would hope that others are gifting to you.
So Catholics for Choice is an organization that works to uplift and amplify the voices of the pro-choice Catholic majority. And we strongly believe in reproductive freedom because of our faith and not in spite of it. So since 1973, or for a little over 50 years, we've been working to encounter, educate, and embolden the pro-choice Catholic majority and working to secure safe and affordable access to reproductive health care across the United States and around the world. And yeah, we do this work to dismantle religiously based obstructions to abortion care, contraceptive access, and comprehensive health care generally, particularly because we know that these barriers disproportionately affect people already impacted by systems of marginalization.
To check in before we keep going, is this volume okay for everybody? Can you hear? Perfect. Wouldn't want to get to the end of this and have anybody not hear the entire time. Great, so to ground us, this whole conversation will be about how you can be a pro-choice Catholic, and so to frame that conversation, here is one of the most startling facts, is that the US alone is home to 73.2 million Catholics, but there are only 278 active bishops in the US. So that shows that the bishops do not speak for all of us on issues related to reproductive health, rights, and justice, especially when all 278 of those active bishops are cisgender men who are supposed to be celibate and wouldn't have any connection to the issue. So the hierarchy does not speak for all Catholics, and we as Catholics for Choice offer a space for information, debunking some of those facts like we will do today, and offering support for anybody who feels like they have felt alone in being a pro-choice Catholic and looking for community.
Yeah, we also see these 278 active bishops being very loud, considering many people falsely assume that being Catholic and pro-choice are things that you can't be both. So, yeah, but grounding us a little bit more, we wanted to start by talking about Catholicism and the anti-abortion movement generally. So the bishops like to say this line that the church's teaching on abortion is unchanged and unchangeable, but we know that it has both changed and is changeable. And really, until recently, Catholic leaders actually taught that the morality of abortion depended on the stage in pregnancy. So from 1140 to 1917, canon law distinguished between a, quote, formed fetus and an unformed one, meaning that abortion was allowed according to church law up to a certain point in pregnancy. And this was the most common belief among church leaders until we get to 1869 when Pope Pius IX announced a ban on abortion. And so the church has been around for 2,000 years, and we really don't see these codifications of restrictions on abortion and this position coming into effect until the last 150 years or so. And also more broadly, the anti-abortion movement stems directly from white supremacy. And so we see in the 1970s, the evangelicals and other denominations in the United States of Protestants looking to the Catholic Church and seeing their success in organizing people around abortion to get them to the polls. And when they're issue of segregating private Christian schools wasn't popular anymore. They kind of had to look around and find something else to mobilize people. So they looked to the Catholics and they found abortion. And so it's never really been about abortion. It's been about white supremacy and control of people's bodies and control over politics and society. And so we see that for a long time in the United States and how we kind of got to where we are today.
Yeah, so as Maddie said, the 278 active bishops that we have in the US are very loud and very powerful. So they, I think, really lead this dominant narrative that I'm sure plenty of you have heard, that you can't be Catholic and pro-choice. But the reality is that in Catholic theology, as it says here, there is plenty of room to discern and question. We'll talk about discernment a little bit later, but the church wants us to be formed in our decisions and in our conscience, and so there's plenty of room to question what is happening in the church, and so that's why really as people with Catholics for Choice, but also just people of faith who are pro-choice, there's plenty of room to disagree, and you can be fully Catholic or whatever faith you want and follow your morals and how that supports reproductive rights. So yeah, that supports how we are fully Catholic, fully pro-choice. I'll let you have a second to read what is on the screen with that statement. That sums up Catholics for Choice, though, really, in one quick paragraph.
Amazing. And we're not just like making it up out of anywhere. Like these are some stats to kind of ground us and understand like where we're coming from, and these are all stats from, renowned research institutions like the Public Religious Research Institute and Guttmacher. But we'll talk about two of the church's best kept secrets today, and this is one of them, which is that the majority of Catholics are pro-choice. So the first stat we have is that 0 is the number of times that abortion is banned, shamed, or discouraged in the Bible. And so for something that appears 0 times in the Bible, a lot of outweighed influence and power is put on it in the church. Also, 98% of Catholic women who are sexually active have used a form of artificial contraception at some point in their lifetime. And all of the artificial contraception methods, so things like the pill, the patch, the ring, condoms, all that is officially prohibited by the Catholic Church. So we see that the vast majority of Catholic women are following their own conscience and choosing what contraceptive works best for their life. Only 8% of Catholics actually agree with the church's official teaching on abortion, which is that it should be illegal in all cases. 1 in 4 abortion patients are Catholic. So 1 in 4 people who are having abortions in the United States self-identify as Catholic, which about matches, if not is a little bit higher than the percentage of Americans who identify as Catholic. So we know, just like all other faiths, Catholic people are having abortions and having abortions at the same rate as people who are religious and non-religious. And then 63% of Catholics believe that abortion should be legal in all or most cases, and that also 68% of Catholics did not want to see Roe versus Wade get overturned. So we see time and time again, the majority of Catholics actually are already pro-choice and are already on our side, but because the bishops are so loud about the church's official stance, we see that a lot of people aren't sure that this is actually what most Catholics believe. So I'll leave these up for a minute, but would also love to hear if there's like anything on the screen surprises folks, or if there's like anything new folks learned from this.
Or just reactions to any of the numbers.
Yeah.
I feel like, it's just really shocking to hear that it's like majority is believe that it should be legal, because just like based on the people I've met, especially being from the South, like it definitely doesn't seem like that. It might just be like
That's great.
Yeah.
How much of a role do bishops, do they have to all believe the exact same thing, and is it because of their leadership position they can make it just seem like that's what everyone believes, or like what is that mechanism of how that works?
So they have a system of reporting, but they also, I think since they're in such a place of power, can speak out in opposition to it. So you see that with Bishop John Stowe, somebody that comes to mind. He's in Lexington, Kentucky, and was really outspoken about LGBTQ support way before Pope Francis or other folks were on board. So I think they have the freedom to do that, but also still like can get pushback from cardinals and people above them. So kind of a like yes and, but they too are in a position to really push church teaching because they can, for lack of a better term, I guess like organize the people in their community and have that position to draft letters that can become church teaching also.
Yeah, I mean, they like run the risk at any moment of like, depending on like the church's leniency and like, you know, who's the cardinal and the Pope at the time, like,
huge, yeah.
they do run the risk of like being defrocked or removed from their position of leadership. So a lot of them act from like especially when it comes to abortion, is kind of like one of like the issues the church has not moved very far on recently. So there isn't a lot of them like speaking out about it because of that concern that they would be removed from their position.
My reaction to like the really high number of like Catholics who are pro-choice and like the 98% of Catholic women use birth control, I think is really interesting because I think in my experience with talking with like self-identified like pro-life family members, talking to them and being like, okay, but what about birth control? What about in these cases? And they're like, oh, well, that's different. And it's like, well, then you're not really staunchly pro-choice. I mean, pro-life, and you're not like following Catholic teaching, like Catholic, like Vatican teachings, like to a T. And I think that's like people need to like learn what the church, like what the Pope like actually says about it.
Yeah, I think it's like it's such an opening, and we talk about this a lot, like when people want to have discussions with, you know, people they love who are Catholic, and either are like pro-choice but or identify as like pro-life or anti-abortion, is like finding those like inroads. So like finding the values you can agree on, like, you know, do you believe women can make moral decisions about their lives? And then like we can agree that we both believe that, and then that's actually a pro-choice value, and that's how it connects to, you know, like kind of hitting those entry points. But the church's official teaching is so out of step with what Catholics believe that there are many inroads to, I think, like most, I mean, as we see here, most Catholics disagree with the church, and so we already disagree with the church, you know, there is inroads.
Yeah.
I was just like really surprised because like these numbers seemed like just a lot higher than what I was expecting, like especially like the one for like abortion patients who are Catholic. Like that seemed, I could be wrong, but like that seems like moving a little bit higher than like the average, which I thought was just really interesting.
Yeah, it is, and I think it's like one of those things where it's like Catholic people are having abortions, and I'm also an abortion doula, and so when I'm abortion douling in DC in the clinic, like I'll have, you know, a client who's like, I'm Catholic and I'm the only person in my parish who would ever have an abortion and no one would have it, and then you like go into the next room and the person's like, I'm Catholic and I'm the only person in my parish who would ever have an abortion, and it's like, literally there are like 3 people who said that today, and it's just like, I think people think that they're the only one and they don't talk about it, but like that's why we do so much work around like storytelling, and work to kind of like amplify those perspectives. So last fall for the Synod on Synodality, we brought a 50-foot long quilt of Catholic abortion stories and abortion stories of Catholic providers to kind of like combat that narrative that Catholics don't have abortion, because they absolutely do every single day.
And it's that culture of like not feeling comfortable talking about it. I think that makes it so isolating, and also makes folks feel like they are the only person that possibly could, and then miss that sense of community that could be so rich and supportive if it was something that we all talked about with our faith partners.
Yeah. Amazing.
Great, so now we are going to move into the section of the presentation where we'll look at the 3 principles of pro-choice Catholicism. So those principles are on the screen: conscience, religious freedom, and social justice. And these are the 3 principles that ground all of the work that we do, really. So we'll run through each of them, starting with conscience. Great. So one of the most fundamental teachings of the Catholic tradition is the supremacy of conscience. The doctrine states that Catholics must use their reason to discern ethically complex situations. That our individual, that our individual conscience is the final arbiter of our moral decision making. So the Catechism, as you see on the screen, states that a human being must always obey the teaching, or Wait, no, sorry. I have more on my script than you do. A human being must always obey the teaching that tells us not to passively accept what the hierarchy says. And one of the most important questions is, do you believe that a person is capable of being a moral agent? And if the answer is yes, then you are fundamentally holding a pro-choice value. So as we think of this idea of like forming our own individual conscience that drives our decision making and our actions, I want to invite folks to reflect on the question, specifically for folks that are on a campus, for how you could support fellow students who are attempting to access contraception, abortion, and prenatal or birth care, and what barriers might they face, and what does your conscience call you to do? So kind of like when the administration or policies are saying one thing, but your conscience is leading you to another, how do you reckon with that? This could be either what you currently are doing or what you would do in this situation. Yeah.
I feel like I would point them towards students for reproductive justice or like any resources I have. And then I feel like barriers probably would be like either people around them or like people who are at school. I feel like my conscience kind of just tells me to like support them in whatever they think is best for them.
Yeah, so like meeting them where they are, figuring out what they need and doing what you can to meet that. Great, thank you. Yeah.
I feel like one of the big barriers that like Loyola students specifically face when it comes to abortion and prenatal and birth care is that Loyola's health insurance and like wellness center and all that does not cover birth control or abortion or any of that. And I think the biggest barrier is like going somewhere else and having to pay for it. And I think that, I don't know, like as a college student, I don't have a lot of money, but I'm not like so broke that if I had a friend who really needed help paying with it, I wouldn't help. But I think that's like, yeah, it's the biggest barrier, and I'm really glad that Reproductive Justice has like free Plan B and free condoms and stuff, because that crap is like $50. It's crazy.
Yeah. How much of this also is just like knowing the networks around you and being able to show up and support in that way by connecting folks. Let me go back here and then to Sophia.
I was just gonna let everyone know there's a Medicaid program that you can enroll in. There's a specific amount of requirements, but it's under $42,000 a year. You're an Illinois resident, and you don't have public insurance, or you don't want to use it, or private insurance, and you can get coverage for birth control, STI testing, all of that. We have quizzes you can take on our website. I don't have our resource because we just printed new ones, but all of you would be eligible for it. So you can get stuff for free at clinics all over Illinois.
Thank you. And Sophia.
And also to go off of that, talk about abortion fund. They're amazing. And if my understanding is correct, you've never turned someone away. Yes. So they will always fund. I think the biggest thing that I have really been learning is just talking about stuff. I feel like people don't know. And it's so taboo, especially in like Catholic culture. I feel like as Catholics, we're so good about talking about things and like pretending that's like what it is. For like a variety of issues. And so I feel like sometimes the biggest work we do, at least in SRJ, is just like making it normal to say the word abortion or to talk about sex or to talk about birth control. And then we can share all these resources we have. But I think really the first step is really just talking about it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and all of the stats we shared like wouldn't be surprising to people if Catholics were talking about contraception and were talking about abortion. And so we also see like that silence does a lot of work for the bishops in terms of perpetuating their idea, you know, that these are what Catholics believe and this is what the laity believes, when we know like that's not true.
Yeah. Great. The second tenet of pro-choice Catholicism is religious freedom. So our faith calls us to value religious pluralism and respect the separation of church and state. Catholics for Choice, as an organization, believes that religious freedom protections extend to everyone, including those who choose not to have any religious affiliation. And so freedom of religion does not give license to institutions like the Catholic Church and bishops to obstruct or coerce the exercise of an individual person's conscience. Great, and so then one question I wanted to toss out there related to religious freedom is, how can religious freedom help us as largely students at a Catholic university work with people from other religious traditions and without religious affiliations to advance policy that would support reproductive rights? Yes, Sophia.
I mean, I think in so many ways Loyola is very good about embracing religious freedom. Well, I guess I can't speak for because I use the Catholic, so. But I do feel like we often have spaces for other religions, which is really wonderful. And so I feel like, then you can't tell people who have a different faith that this is like a policy that they must abide by if that's like not in line with their actual beliefs. And I think that we have had conversations in SRJ, especially with some of our Muslim organizers, Jewish organizers, where some of these policies are almost actively against their faith. And I think by bringing everyone together, like it really creates a stronger coalition argument that these policies should be reversed and should not be in action because they don't represent everyone, just a very small minority.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I also think that, I mean, yes, with Abrahamic religions, but like with all religions, people like to put these really hard lines and differences between like what Christianity looks like, what Judaism looks like, what Islam looks like, what Hinduism looks like, whatever. And really, like, we're all sharing from the same wealth of experience, and that I think having more like interfaith dialogue makes you see that like we're not all so different, and that we can teach each other things and see how others view the world.
Yeah.
I also think like the religious undertone of like human dignity throughout all religions is very important in conversations about like reproductive freedom, and how acknowledging like whether you're religious or not, like Catholic standpoint and like more Christian standpoints, like acknowledging dignity within other people, just the fact that they're human makes them worthy is a really great place to find universality within plurality and using it to like connect with people and to advance things that guarantee you and protect people's dignity.
Amazing. So our third principle is social justice. And this is where we get to kind of the second best kept secret of the Catholic Church, which is Catholic social teaching. And so as Catholics, we know like our advocacy must center those who are most marginalized in our society, because we know that all people deserve access to the economic, social, and political power and resources that they need to be able to actually make those conscience-based decisions around family planning. And so that's one of the reasons why why reproductive justice is a Catholic social justice value. But there are 7 principles of Catholic social teaching or Catholic social justice. They're life and dignity of the human person, the call to family and community and participation, rights and responsibilities, the preferential option for the poor and vulnerable, the dignity of work and the rights of workers, solidarity and care for God's creation. And so these all connect to reproductive justice, especially the reproductive justice framework as iterated by Sister Song and other organizations. But we see with human rights and dignity that require us to dismantle systems keeping people from accessing all of the rights that they are entitled to, especially the right to make decisions about if, when, and how they want to have a family. In the call to family, community, and participation, our faith encourages us to build a society where each person has the ability to contribute and thrive in the way that they want to, and so that it requires people to have access to all of the family planning decisions that they want to be able to make. Our rights and responsibilities mean each of us has the right to raise children in safe communities where all of their needs are being met, and it also grants us the right to decide our own reproductive futures. And the church calls for us to offer the preferential option for the poor and vulnerable. And we know that economic status is directly tied to reproductive care, whether it's the constraints, the choices people are actually able to make, or constrains people's access to the full spectrum of reproductive health care. And so also as Catholic First Choice, we also acknowledge that we must move beyond like acts of service and as the Catholic Church has often done, and move to questioning the systems that perpetuate these economic imbalances. And then we also see this kind of ties into the principles around the dignity of work and the rights of workers. And so in a country where we know that healthcare is so often tied to employment, the rights of workers are inherently connected to reproductive justice. And when we talk about Catholic universities, I mean, one of the things that comes up in terms of reproductive health access is as employees at Catholic universities, what healthcare options do they have on the insurance, and whether their insurance has, selected to not provide contraception care or to not provide coverage for abortion in their insurance. And so that's like directly relates to the dignity of work and the right of workers. We also see solidarity, which invites us to stand with those who are oppressed by the systems in our society. And each system is interconnected, so understanding that reproductive justice and achieving it is going to take radical solidarity across issues and force us to envision the realities of many others. And then lastly, with the care for creation, we know that this directly ties to safe and sustainable communities, which is one of being able to raise children in these safe and sustainable communities, which is one of the principal tenets of reproductive justice as iterated by Sister Song. And so it connects so directly to that environmental movement and work with the care for God's creation. So our question for reflection on this one is, what does the reproductive justice definition mean to you, and how does this tie into our or generally religious beliefs of pro-choice Catholics, or your own beliefs as a pro-choice Catholic or of any faith? Would you like to share, Laura? Not to put you on the spot.
I think it counters a lot of the narrative also that people who are pro-choice don't want kids, and I think it shows that to have children, a next generation that has a strong and safe community, we need to show up in all of these ways. It's not just to have a choice to not have a kid, but it's a choice to actively have a kid in a safe and supportive environment. And so as a pro-choice Catholic, I think it supports it for all of the Catholic social teaching reasons that you shared, Maddie. We need collective liberation, as you said, but just a world that's so much more safe and supportive than the one we have now, if we want children that are born tomorrow or next year or 10 years from now to be able to grow and flourish and have spaces where they themselves can then form their own conscience and have these conversations. But looking at the world today, I think lots needs to be done in order to have these safe and sustainable communities. And as Catholics, I think we see a direct linkage between what our faith calls us to do and the work that needs to be done to get there. That's my mini reflection.
Yeah, Kaylee.
Yeah, I would say that everything you just said, Lauren, kind of ties into the difference between being pro-choice and being pro-birth.
Yeah.
And that you can have this idea that being pro-life means allowing a pregnancy to be carried to term and to be pro-birth and very for having children. But then it's not just that; it's the aftermath of okay, now you have a child, now what? And the taking care of them and
everything else that comes with raising a child is, I feel like, very kind of undervalued in ways. Like our foster care system is like our foster care system, the immigration system itself.
Yeah.
It's like there are systemic things that are contributing to a pro-birth culture, but
Mhm.
like then you're not being pro-life in taking care of the children that you birth. So.
Completely.
It also ties into the Catholic social teaching value of the life and dignity of the human person, that it's not just like, life of someone once they're born, it's also respecting and protecting the life of the person who's giving birth to the child and the family and the community that surrounds them.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm a mom in the room here, and I love this lens to look at my Catholic faith. I identify as a Catholic and as a feminist and as pro-choice, and I sometimes look to the arguments that I hear in the Catholic Church regarding reproductive rights, and my journey included infertility and IVF. And I find the dichotomy of a Catholic saying, oh, pro-choice, we're pro-family, we're pro-children, we're all this, but also you shouldn't do IVF either because, although that's your path to becoming a parent, that's not the right path either. So I so admire everyone in the room for kind of breaking open and questioning some of the stuff that I lived through as a young cat. I'm in my 50s now, and some of the stuff, man, the 70s and 80s, there was just all kinds of messages given to young Catholic women. So I love this breaking opening and looking at the hypocrisy.
Yeah.
It's a great reflection. Thank you.
Yeah, here and then we'll go with that.
I think to talk more about Catholic social teaching, I also think that the tenet of subsidiarity goes with this, which basically says that higher social systems shouldn't interfere with what lower institutions like purpose or like what they do. And I think that goes with like how like the government is handling abortion right now, where it's like it shouldn't be that that Congress and like these higher powers have a say in what you can and can't do on like a local level.
Yeah.
I think it's like taking away like the communities and like what's happening like right now on the ground, like their right to choice and right to say what they believe in, what they want to do.
Absolutely.
I think it's surprising to a lot of people that more than half of people who have abortions already have children. So I think that really leads back to the how and why, and when you want to have a family is an important factor.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Perfect. So, as a Jesuit grad myself, I wanted to dive into some of the pieces of Jesuit education and see how those connect with reproductive rights, particularly for folks at Loyola to be able to use this language as you defend work that SRJ is doing on campus and keep pushing for greater reform. So, we'll run through each of these, and I would love to hear thoughts on this also. There's no, I guess, like official list of Jesuit charism, but this is the principles of Jesuit education, which is even more fitting, I think. So, do these generally look familiar to folks from Loyola? Great. I know, I went to Xavier, and they like have these signs everywhere on campus, so can't escape it. So looking at cura personalis, this is the right of each person, the care for the whole self. And so this value emphasizes individualized attention and respect for each person's unique gifts, needs, and circumstances. So I'm curious if anybody here has a thought about what the connection is between that and like the reproductive rights angle, or how you would present that connection to the administration maybe. Yeah.
I would say caring for the whole person includes caring for someone's right to make decisions about their own body and their own reproductive rights, and having that choice is caring for them holistically.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that holistic lens is so important, where the person who is seeking any type of care is the one who gets to decide what that care looks like for them. And so listening to that person's unique needs and hearing what they are saying they need. It's not up to the university or any administration. Look at insurance companies also. Like, it's not up to any institution to decide what that looks like for you, but caring for the person means letting them express what they need and you meeting that need, just as we were saying earlier. Next up is discernment, which encourages students to be open to God's Spirit as they make decisions. And so this, St. Ignatius of Loyola is all about the end of day contemplation with the highs and lows of the day. And so really reflecting on what your faith is calling you to do, what God's trying to speak to you about. And so this is practiced often through prayer, reflection, consultation with others, and considering the full impact of actions from all different angles. So again, any thoughts on how discernment ties in? I can share my thoughts, but this is essential to the work that our conscience is doing. We talked about conscience earlier, and to form your conscience, I think we have to go through this process of discernment to really know what we believe and why we believe it. And as I know all of you have experienced with the administration or others just pushing back, it's so important to be strongly solidified in your own views and conscience, and practicing discernment, I think, really supports that decision making. Next, we have finding God in all things, which is grounded in the Jesuit education is grounded in the presence of God and encompasses imagination, emotion, and intellect. The Jesuit vision encourages students to seek the divine in all things, in all people and cultures, in all areas of study, and leaning in and learning from every human experience. So as this urges us to see God in every aspect of life, this includes the personal decisions about reproductive health. To practice this value, we have to respect the sacredness of each person's identity and journey, and in fact, God, as this says, is found in every part of each of our journeys. So we trust the divine God to make decisions, and if God is in each of us, then God is supporting the decisions that we make as we seek reproductive health care. Therefore, that is an act of our faith and our spirit in our lives and decision making. Next up is going to be the Magis, which is a commitment to the, it's kind of a hallmark, I guess, of the Jesuit education, at least it was in my experience, but it's seeking the more. And so it goes beyond what's expected, interacting with the world with generosity and excellence and empathy. And this is often modeled by personal accountability and high expectations of achievement. And so as students are asking for change on policies, I know we have one DePaul student here, but they're really pushing back against contraception ban. So it's, I think, a mix of pushing back and also pushing forward depending on what the university's policies are. But students are asking for changes because of their care for the campus community and wanting more than what exists now. And I think that is a healthy, beautiful thing that campuses are home to. And so also thinking about that accountability lens there is good and pushes us to be able to hold the university accountable to any promises they make or wishes that they want. But generosity, excellence, and empathy are asked of the administration as we have these conversations, and I think that's a grounding piece here. Next up is reflection, which is another fundamental value of Jesuit education. Students are invited to pause and consider the world around them and their place within it before making decisions. This includes and often requires challenging the status quo, acknowledging biases, and accepting responsibility for actions. Are there thoughts on how reflection ties into the work that you all are doing or reproductive justice in general? Yeah, Sophia.
I think since a huge part of reproductive justice is intersectionality, in being an effective activist, reflection is always required. there is no perfect action. We will not ever be perfect in like the work that we do, and so reflection is a pivotal tenet in ensuring that we're doing the best that we can and constantly learning and growing. So I feel like in that way, like our activism and Jessica is spirit joined.
Absolutely. Yeah, Kaylee?
There's a saying in Paul that like service without reflection is just work. And that like reflection is always needed in order to know and further develop your why behind the things you do, and to be better motivated and have your goals set out in a more concrete way. And I think that's really important.
Great. I think the other piece I will throw in here is the reflection of anybody seeking reproductive care. I think reflection for any healthcare decision is often overlooked and glossed over, but anybody that's ever made any doctor's appointment knows that it's not something that is done without thought or care, and so trusting that somebody seeking care has reflected on it themselves, and that should be the end-all be-all, is great. And challenging the status quo too. I think a lot of schools that we've connected with are like, we can't do this because we're Catholic, and implied there is that this is just what Catholic schools are required to do. And so challenging that both from students and the administration and faculty is really important. Two more, bear with me. We have service rooted in justice and love, which Jesuit education cultivates awareness of social and personal evil, but points out that God's love is always more powerful than that. So this encourages service and justice on campus and in the community, and certainly the work that SRJ is doing is that service, especially filling in the gaps when the administration is blatantly like missing a huge need that there should be fulfilling. And so I think all of you are living out this value so deeply by showing up in pursuit of justice and love and care for your neighbors in the community. And then lastly, this is fairly similar, but people for and with others. This calls us to use your gifts and talents for the betterment of others, particularly those in need or marginalized. We should be living this out daily. The Jesuits say with that reflection every day to consider and contemplate how that was or was not done. So similarly, all of you are working towards liberation in your communities, and we know, as Maddie said, for why we do this work is that folks who are already on the margins are the ones impacted the most by harmful policies. And so by using our gifts to advocate for truly everybody's needs to be met, we are following this principle and showing up with solidarity and care.
Amazing. Our last section today is we're going to talk a little bit more about the Catholic Church and contraception, knowing specifically about Catholic campuses and their ban on contraception or lack of contraceptive access. So to kind of start us off, we wanted to talk about the Papal Commission on Birth Control. And so in 1963, we see like the birth control pill is now available, and there's a lot more discussion around artificial contraception and some of the cultural shifts about what this means coming into play. So Pope John the 23rd appointed a pontifical commission on birth control to assess the church's position and the theological permissibility of these new forms of birth control. And it was a part of the Second Vatican Council, which was kind of set up to look at a lot of the policies of the church and the church's teaching and kind of in many ways modernize the church. And so this Papal Commission was a part of it, but separate in some ways. They didn't want to talk about this at the actual council, so they're like, we'll create a Papal Commission that's on the side, and they'll look into it, and we'll determine. So throughout the course of the commission's history, they looked at the history of the church's position. They also For the time, what was kind of remarkable included lay people, including lay women, who shared their own experiences with birth control, particularly with the failures of natural family planning or the rhythm method, which was at the time and continues to be the only method of contraception that the church allows in its official teaching. And so it included both bishops and also these lay people, physicians, theologians, all sorts of people. And so in 1966, they came together and actually recommended lifting the ban. And the Pope was like, I don't know if I believe this, so let's get a second round of bishops alone to judge this. And so they had 15 bishops look at it again to present the findings, and actually 9 of the bishops voted to change the church's teaching, 3 of them voted not to, and then 3 of them abstained. So even a group of 15 more bishops were like, we need to change the church's teaching. And then the 3 bishops who did say that we shouldn't change it issued what became a minority report on why. And really, they didn't have much to say about the church's teaching or the theological basis of the ban on contraception, but they had a lot to say about what it would mean for the Catholic Church to change their mind. And so their main answer is here, which is that the Church cannot change her answer because its answer is true, and it is true because the Catholic Church could not have so wrongly erred for all of the centuries of its history. So really, we got some circular logic here. So like, we can't admit we're wrong. And kind of ironically, they said that they were worried about how it would damage the institution of the church and how it would damage papal authority and the authority of bishops if they changed their mind on contraception. And what actually happened is that not changing their mind, when many people thought they would, ended up damaging the church far more than admitting they were wrong ever would have. And so after, this, we see sharp declines in mass attendance and sharp declines in practicing Catholics around the world. And so when the Second Vatican Council was announced, so many people were optimistic that there would be a change in birth control in the church. And this really kind of dashed those when Pope Paul announced Humana Vitae, which was a 1968 reaffirmation of the church's official teaching on birth control and that prohibition on all forms of artificial contraception that remains in effect today and has had profound impacts both for students who are on Catholic campuses whose churches use Humana Vitae as the explanation, but also around the world in terms of understanding the way that the Catholic Church has influenced the kind of relief that's available to people in all countries and the requirements of organizations like Catholic Relief Services and Catholic Charities to not provide contraceptive coverage. So not only impacting people in the U.S., but also all around the world. We just know that this position, as we talked about with the 98% of Catholic women who've used contraception at some point in their life, it is so out of step with the Catholic people. And so considering that Catholics have sex, they use contraception and have abortion at the same rates as other people, the Vatican stance is such a clear demonstration of its disconnection with the actual people of the church and the lived experience of the people in the views that they claim to represent. These are kind of some more of our stats when it comes to birth control specifically in the church. And so according to the National Institute of Health, approximately 1% of the people in the United States use natural family planning, which is the only form of contraception that is officially approved by the Catholic Church, or the rhythm method, or tracking ovulation and abstaining from sex during periods of ovulation. And notably, it has about a 94% failure rate. And so when we saw the church kind of considering this, the married people who were part of the commission were such an important voice of bringing both their stories of using natural family planning in the way that it wasn't working for them, and also the stories of the people they knew. And so even though they had these conservative Catholic people on the commission, and they're like, these lay people are super conservative, there's no way they'll support contraception, their lived experience of the failure of natural family planning and the influence of that, inspired them to believe in change. And then again, that 98% of Catholic women have used a form of artificial contraception. So the vast majority of Catholics are using these, and the church wants to kind of force its position and its official teaching on students at Catholic universities and other people around the world when it can't even get its own members of its church to believe in its teaching. And so it's kind of another irony there of why don't we start with the Catholics themselves who allegedly believe in the teachings of the church first.
Yeah. Excellent. So I want to share a few ways to get. Thank you so much for listening. As an organizer, I want to share a few ways to get plugged in. So as we are starting the Easter season soon, we are going to be launching our next campaign, which I believe is officially called Because of My Faith, which leans into the narrative that we always say, we are pro-choice Catholics because of our faith, not in spite of it. And so this campaign will be countering a lot of the federal and statewide legislative policies that we are seeing pop up all around the country nearly every day at this point. So we'll be doing some lobbying and get some resource sharing, some house meetings with folks to be able to share and build community with each other. So that is one thing I want to plug, and if you are interested in doing that, there's some local tie-ins that are possible. And I would love to connect with you. We have our table up here with signups, and then iCard is there also. But then I'll run through a few opportunities. One is this beautiful pledge card that you see on the screen also, but these are little cards that you can distribute in your community, and on the back there are some stats about pro-choice Catholicism and a way to get plugged in. They're great because if you go to church and you see one of these in a pew, you know another pro-choice Catholic must have put it there, so it debunks a little bit of that like isolation a little bit. So in itself, it's a little bit of an act of solidarity and a great support, but folks distribute these in libraries or coffee shops, at church, on campus. You can put them anywhere because pro-choice Catholics are everywhere. So that is one piece. We also just launched our Young Catholic Repro Collective, which is a community of pro-choice Catholics and our co-conspirators who are 18 to 26, and so it's a virtual community where folks will gather and strategize and build community and plans to counter what the Catholic Church is doing in their community or on their campus. And then let me make sure I'm not missing anything. One of the big pieces is just integrating the language that we've shared today and some of the Catholic social teaching in with your conversations around reproductive rights. This helps us merge those two together and create that idea that they can be congruent with each other and they don't have to operate in separate worlds. We also are on social media, so if you want to follow us there, we're on everything. Our organizers, there's a team of about 4 of us, and we host one-on-ones often, so if you are like, hey, what you said is interesting, but I don't know where I can plug in with that, we are happy to chat and see what your skills are and what you are interested in. Some folks don't want to be holding a sign at a protest, and that's totally okay, but there's ways to support the movement that aren't as public-facing. And then lastly, I think we do a lot of story collection, and so this booklet, if you want to look at it, is one example, but this is a booklet of stories that we took to the Vatican in October from advocates all around the world who are Catholic, and we presented it to Synod delegates and mailed a copy to Pope Francis, but we collect stories all the time from folks who are Catholic, were raised Catholic, or are impacted by the church's lobbying and power, which is everybody. And we use those to make sure that our work is grounded in the experiences of folks who are in the network, and also it offers really compelling arguments for why we should be Catholic in supporting. So we always collect stories and are really grateful for that.
But you can also include stories about being denied reproductive health care on Catholic campuses, or other experiences with the Catholic hierarchy's overreach on Catholic campuses. We would also welcome stories about that.
Great. And then I think we have a survey, but before we pivot to that, I think there are 2 announcements, and then we can take questions also. But I'll pop it to Sophia first for announcements, and then Linda.
Okay. Hi everyone. I'm Sophia. I'm an organizer for SRJ. Thank you all so much for coming. Please stick around. We have snacks. Please talk to all of the lovely people over here. And then I just wanted to plug SRJ is having a fundraiser. We are completely self-funded because we are, not a registered student organization. Loyola doesn't like us. So I have some prizes over there that you can win. We've got some really good stuff. Rivers and Roads gift cards, Women Children First gift cards. I know. So check it out. I'll be sitting over there. I'd love to talk with you guys. If you have any questions about SRJ or fundraiser, please let me know. And then we'll get to it.
Yeah, you can mention the book.
Okay.
Yeah.
First of all, this was wonderful. And I'm not even Catholic, and I learned so much that I think that not just everyone here, but so many people will really benefit from this. And I'm Linda from Chicago for Abortion Rights, one of the many tables here, and I'll quickly say what they are. It was really exciting to, work with SRJ and being able to help support this and talk about it with others, and hopefully have many more things like this come about. And rather than go through these, this is just a tiny sample of the amazing literature at all of the tables here. And I just want to say what who the other tables here are that Chicago for Abortion Rights, among the many groups that we work with. So there's Chicago Abortion Fund, way in the back, who have done for decades the amazing work that is now so cutting edge critical of the people that are coming and continue to come in record numbers to our state to get an abortion. And as Sophia or someone else said earlier, no one has ever been turned away. That is amazing. They're in the middle of their amazing fundathon that happens every year that Chicago for Abortion Rights and others are supporting, full blast. There's also Illinois Contraceptive Access Now, ICANN, with wonderful literature over there and ways to get involved. There's Reproductive Transparency Now, RTN, which has been, a close collaborator with Chicago for Abortion Rights, and their incredible work to expose and counteract the harmful disinformation of so-called crisis pregnancy centers, which we know as fake clinics. So they are doing work in and around Chicago, and please check them out. And Chicago for Abortion Rights, we're a network focused on maintaining a collaborative educational space, as well as an outreach, but as well as mobilizing people in all the ways that we can in our great numbers. The majority of the population, just like the majority of Catholics, is for not only legalization, but access everywhere, not just in our state, but every state, and anywhere that our government and country has impact in denying reproductive justice around the world. So we emphasize all of those things, and in particular, we have helped to initiate and lead coalitions to put people in the streets at many different junctures around Supreme Court decisions, certainly since the fall of Roe, and we expect more of that to go on with the assaults that are happening horrendously around the country. So more information about Chicago for Abortion Rights is also available with several upcoming events. And one of those mobilizations that we, and I expect others here, will be interested in participating in will happen in the streets of Chicago on May Day, May 1st. There are flyers there for that as well. And please pick one of those up. We are trying to make sure there is a reproductive justice contingent on May Day, Thursday, May 1st, beginning at 11 a.m., a rally and march from Union Park, which is just west of downtown, all the way to Grant Park. It should be a memorable, outstanding, and important day in support of all immigrants, against any detentions on campus, against all deportations, and certainly for reproductive justice, labor rights, etc. So, last two things. There's a special place in our hearts for working with students. So there's many of us here from Chicago for Abortion Rights behind our table and around, that students are going to really fight for every generation and the next generation. And if we don't accomplish that now, we are in serious trouble. But I believe that we will and we can. Final thing, Chicago for Abortion Rights put an important emphasis on making sure this event takes place and more like them. And we put a lot of teamwork and resources into making sure we could bring these amazing speakers and everything that they're presenting to us. So that took a lot of time and energy and resources, and we would like, and this is totally up to the generosity spirit here, but we would like to pass this around and then have it back at the table for anything that you might be able to donate and still have some left to participate in every other group here so that we can help cover some of the costs. So see you at the tables. I'm gonna just pass it around. And any amount is good, whatever you can. See you at the tables and hope that everybody signs up and engages with all of us here, and we all have sign-up sheets and way to be back in touch and work together. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Great. So we have this space until about 4 o'clock, so you can feel free to mingle around. Please